I should have noticed it sooner. The way Trish started pulling away wasn't subtle. She was colder, less interested in talking, always in a rush to be somewhere else. At first, I told myself it was just stress from her job at the hospital, but then the excuses started piling up. Late nights at work when her shifts clearly ended hours earlier, a sudden obsession with keeping her phone locked and face down at all times. And the worst part, the money? It was little things at first: unexplained withdrawals, missing cash, bills that should have been paid suddenly marked overdue. It wasn't until I went through our bank statements one night that I realized something was seriously wrong. The numbers didn't add up. Large sums had been moved to accounts I didn't recognize, and transactions had been split into smaller amounts, almost like she was trying to avoid setting off any alerts. I printed everything out, circled the suspicious payments, and brought it up to her the next morning. She barely reacted, just shrugged and said, "It's probably a mistake. I'll check it later." But she never did. That's when I knew I had to dig deeper. I started keeping track of her. I didn't want to believe it, but my gut told me there was more going on. One evening, when she claimed she was stuck in a late meeting, I drove past the hospital parking lot. Her car wasn't there. I kept going, not even sure where I was headed, and then, just by chance, I saw it. Parked outside a high-end steakhouse downtown, right next to a sleek black sedan. And then I saw him, Mark. He walked out first, holding the door open with that smug expression, and then Trish followed. She laughed at something he said, her hand brushing his arm, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My wife, the woman who swore she loved me, sneaking around with some guy in an expensive suit while I was at home, trying to keep our family together. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my fingers went numb, but I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed more. I started checking our shared accounts daily. That's when I found something even worse. Loans in my name, ones I never signed for, credit cards linked to fake email addresses, money being funneled into what looked like business accounts. But when I ran the names, they led to nowhere. Mark's name was attached to some of them. He wasn't just some guy she was sneaking around with. They were working together. When I finally confronted her, she tried to gaslight me. "You're being paranoid. You don't trust me," she said, voice trembling, but eyes still calculating. But I had proof. The statements, the photos, the loan documents. I laid them all out in front of her. That was when the mask cracked. She didn't deny it. She just stared at me, knowing there was nothing left to say. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just said, "I hope he was worth it," and walked away. The text message came while I was at work, mid-shift, covered in grease and sweat. "Josh, I can't do this anymore. I've filed for divorce. The papers will be sent over soon. Please don't fight this." I read it 3 times, my hand shaking. Just like that? No discussion, no argument, just a sudden end to our life together. My first thought was that there had to be a mistake, but deep down I already knew the truth. The late nights, the secretive behavior, the sudden urgency to update our finances. This wasn't a spur of the moment. This had been planned. I raced home after my shift, my stomach in knots, half expecting to see Trish waiting with some kind of explanation. But the house was already stripped of her presence, drawers half empty, her jewelry missing. Even the wedding photo from our bedroom wall was gone. That was the moment it hit me. She hadn't just left, she had erased me. I started searching through our paperwork, opening folders, logging into our bank accounts. That's when I found them: legal documents, already signed, with dates that went back months. She had been working with a lawyer, behind my back, long before she ever sent that text. Then, the calls started coming in. Unfamiliar numbers, automated messages about finalizing proceedings quickly to minimize legal complications. It didn't take long to figure out where they were coming from. Mark, he wasn't calling me directly. Of course he was too careful for that, but his fingerprints were all over it. He wanted this done fast, wanted me to sign away everything without asking questions. I might have done just that if I hadn't looked deeper. While going through our shared financial accounts, I noticed discrepancies: money missing, transactions I didn't recognize. At first, I thought Trish had just been saving money without telling me. But then I found something worse: loans, in my name. Ones I never applied for, accounts with my information attached, but not mine. The payments were being funneled to a separate account under a different name, and when I traced it back, I found the connection: Trisha's lawyer. It wasn't just about getting a clean break. She had been siphoning money for months, covering her tracks, making sure that by the time she left, she would walk away with everything while I was left. And Mark, he was right there with her, making sure I never stood a chance. When I confronted Trish, she didn't even look guilty. "You'll land on your feet, Josh. This is just what's best for everyone," she said, her voice empty. I could barely breathe, barely think, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to roll over and let them take everything from me. I had proof, I had leverage, and I was going to use it. I couldn't believe it when Trish sent me that text. Divorce, just like that, after everything we'd been through. It didn't make sense. We were about to move into a new house, trying to rebuild after years of struggle, and then this. I stared at my phone for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of it. I felt numb, betrayed, but I had to find out why. Something didn't add up, so I started digging. The first thing I did was check her phone. I had never been the type to snoop, but everything felt off, and I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something bigger was going on. When I looked through her texts, my heart sank. I found one from Mark, the guy she'd been seeing. It wasn't just flirtation, it was a plan, a carefully crafted message about meeting up at a lawyer's office. She'd already been working on the divorce behind my back, planning every step without me even knowing. That wasn't all. As I kept digging, I found more signs of a deeper betrayal. The real shock came when I looked at our finances. Trish had been secretly transferring money from our joint accounts into what looked like fake accounts. The sums were small at first, but when I looked at the dates, I realized these transfers started happening months ago, right around the time things started feeling strange. She was covering her tracks, moving money out of our savings and into accounts I didn't recognize, accounts with names that didn't even sound real. I felt like I was in a nightmare, watching as everything I had worked for was being taken away from me piece by piece. Then things took a darker turn. I found out Trish had taken out loans, using my identity. It wasn't just a mistake or an oversight. She had forged my signature, using my name to secure money from various places to cover her own debts. The more I uncovered, the worse it got. It wasn't just about her wanting to be free. It was about her trying to protect herself financially while draining me dry. I knew I needed more than just these financial documents to confront her. I needed proof that it wasn't just Trish making bad decisions, but that Mark was pulling the strings. So I started tracking him. I knew he worked in sales, but I didn't think much of it until I stumbled across some odd transactions tied to his name, payments to shady companies, loans, linked to businesses I knew were fronts. Mark wasn't just some salesman. He was a manipulator, using his charm to get what he wanted. And I had to expose him. I enlisted the help of Jimmy, my old friend, who had been in the mechanic business long enough to know how things worked in shady circles. Jimmy didn't know about Trish and Mark, but when I told him about the strange things I'd discovered, he went to work. He sent me documents showing how Mark was involved in fraudulent schemes with some other companies. They were laundering money, funneling it through fake business deals. Jimmy even managed to get access to some conversations Mark had with his partners, discussing how to hide the stolen funds. I knew I was onto something big, and as the pieces fell into place, I realized I had everything I needed. I just had to wait for the right moment to make my move. I remember the exact moment the decision hit me. Sitting in my small living room, the weight of everything I'd uncovered in the last few months was unbearable. The emails, the hidden accounts, and the undeniable proof of Mark's shady business practices were in front of me. But it wasn't just about getting back at Trish and Mark anymore. It was about exposing the lies they'd wrapped their entire lives in. I couldn't keep letting them walk away without consequences. I took the plunge. I reached out to a local news outlet, telling them I had proof of large-scale financial fraud. They were eager to meet me. And after a couple of meetings, I handed over everything: screenshots of transactions, bank statements, and even a recording of Mark speaking with his criminal associates. The way Mark had convinced Trish to cover for him, to take loans in my name, was infuriating. Trish had been too deep into his lies, covering for him, even when the evidence was right in front of her. As the media picked up the story, it exploded into a full-blown scandal. I didn't expect the reaction to be so swift. Within hours, it was all over the news. local woman, and sales manager, exposed in major fraud scheme. Trisha's career as a nurse was in shambles. Her colleagues, who had once looked up to her now, questioned her character. She'd been hiding money in secret accounts, laundering it through bogus loans and fake invoices. The information made it to her workplace, and I heard rumors about how they were now investigating her as well. Trish wasn't the compassionate caregiver they'd once thought. She had been manipulating the system, stealing from me, all while pretending to be the victim. Mark, on the other hand, faced immediate backlash. I watched as his colleagues turned on him. One day, I ran into a guy who worked in the same company, and he mentioned how everyone was whispering about Mark's shady dealings. Apparently, Mark had tried to cover up his criminal activities by bribing people within the company. But it was too late. The walls were closing in on him. His own colleagues couldn't keep quiet anymore. The pressure from his coworkers and the media scrutiny broke him down. I saw him at a coffee shop one morning, his face pale and shaking. I overheard him telling someone on the phone that his boss had demanded an explanation, but he couldn't give one. The real twist came when the authorities started investigating. It wasn't just the media anymore. The police and financial regulators began looking into the fraud, pulling records from Mark's company and his fake accounts. They discovered a whole network of illicit transactions, all linked to him. I remember one afternoon when I got a call from a detective, confirming that they had found forged documents Mark had used to get fake loans. The authorities were relentless. They questioned him about every move, and soon enough, they froze his accounts, leaving him unable to cover his tracks. Trish couldn't escape the fallout either. I saw her trying to defend herself to her friends, but it was obvious she knew the truth was out there. The media reports were damning, and I could see the guilt on her face every time I ran into her. She tried to act like the victim for so long, but now it was clear she'd been just as guilty as Mark. The day I found out how deep the mess really went, it all started with a phone call from a reporter. The voice on the other end was steady, professional, but I could hear the underlying urgency in it. "Are you Josh Mitchell?" the reporter asked. And I knew immediately something was off. I said yes, and then came the bombshell. "We've been looking into Mark's business dealings, and we've uncovered something disturbing. Can you confirm any involvement?" That was the moment I knew things were spiraling out of control for them, and I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of justice in it all. Over the next few days, the media storm started. I never wanted the attention, but I also knew I couldn't back down. The more I uncovered about Mark's criminal activities, the more I realized that this wasn't just about getting revenge, it was about exposing the truth. I started digging deeper into the financial statements that Mark and Trish had kept hidden. I knew about the loans Trish had taken out using my name, but what I didn't realize was how extensive Mark's involvement in money laundering really was. I had no idea that Mark had been pulling strings behind the scenes to move money from one account to another, laundering it through shell companies and fake invoices. It wasn't just about the money he had stolen, it was about the entire system of deceit they had built. The more I uncovered, the more it felt like the walls were closing in on me. I never wanted to hurt Trish, but she was part of this. When I confronted her about the evidence I had, she just broke down. She'd known about the shady stuff Mark was doing, but I don't think she fully realized how deep it all went until it came to light. She'd been living in a bubble, convincing herself that everything was fine, but the truth was undeniable. She had used my identity to take loans, transferred money into secret accounts, and even forged documents. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was fraud. When she saw the evidence, her face went pale. "Josh, I didn't think it would go this far," she said, but those words didn't mean anything to me anymore. The damage was done. Meanwhile, Mark was losing his grip on everything. I started seeing the cracks in his facade. At work, his colleagues started asking questions. He was under investigation, and the pressure was mounting. He tried to call me, tried to smooth things over, but there was nothing he could say. One afternoon, I saw him in his car, slumped over the wheel, staring at his phone. His usual bravado was gone, replaced by the frantic, desperate man I knew he was underneath. The next day, I received a notification that his company had suspended him pending further investigation into his financial dealings. I could see the sweat on his face when he realized that his empire was crumbling. The authorities came knocking on his door soon after, and that's when it all started to feel real. They were investigating him for money laundering, fraud, and embezzlement. Everything I had uncovered was now part of the official case against him. Meanwhile, Trisha's friends were slowly pulling away from her. At first, they tried to defend her, but when the truth came out, they had no choice but to distance themselves. She was a pariah, and the weight of it was crushing her. As for me, the legal battles were long, but I found some solace in the compensation I received from Mark's fraudulent actions. It didn't heal the emotional scars, but it was a form of justice, a small piece of restitution for what he had taken from me. The fact that I could at least pay off some of the debt he had created in my name made me feel like I wasn't just a victim. I was taking control back. In the end, I realized that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about rebuilding my life, piece by piece, even as everything around me fell apart. The changes in my life were undeniable, even if they came slowly. After everything that happened, I found myself staring at a world I didn't quite recognize. Trisha's betrayal, the financial chaos she and Mark had created, all of it, left me shattered. But the moment I decided to take control was when I noticed how I had been letting them dictate my emotions, my actions. I couldn't keep letting the past consume me. I started small, finding solace in the mechanics of my work. The old dream of having my own shop had always been pushed aside, but now it felt like the right time to finally pursue it. It was a project I could pour myself into, and slowly, it started taking shape. Every phone call, every hammer strike, every little detail in setting up the place felt like I was rebuilding myself from the ground up. One of the first things I did was find a small rundown building. I remember walking in and immediately seeing the potential. It had a certain charm to it, even though it was far from perfect. I signed the lease and began making plans. Over time, I fixed the roof, painted the walls, and cleaned out the junk. There was something about the work, being able to stand back and look at something that I had built, that started to heal the damage done by the divorce. At first, it was just about getting back on my feet financially, but as the weeks went by, it became something more. The shop wasn't just a way to earn a living, it was a fresh start. It was at the shop that I met Kelly. She came in one morning, asking about getting some work done on her old car. I remember the first thing that struck me was her no-nonsense attitude. She wasn't like the women I had met before. No games, no pretenses. We struck up a conversation about cars, and it felt like I could finally breathe. She was easy to talk to, and I didn't feel like I had to hide my past. She didn't judge me, and I didn't feel like I had to pretend to be someone I wasn't. That first conversation turned into more, and before I knew it, we were spending time outside of the shop, grabbing coffee and talking about life. She wasn't in a rush, and neither was I. It was just simple. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward. Meanwhile, Trisha's life was falling apart. I didn't seek her out, but I started hearing rumors through friends, mutual acquaintances. Trish was isolated, retreating into herself as the scandal surrounding her and Mark's financial manipulations grew. She'd always been the center of attention, but now she had no one. Friends who once supported her pulled away when they realized the extent of her lies. From what I gathered, she had tried to reach out to Mark, but he was nowhere to be found. He'd sunk deeper into his own mess, and I was beginning to hear that authorities were investigating him for fraud. I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would, though. I had gotten my revenge without lifting a finger, just letting the truth unfold. As I focused on my shop, I saw it grow. I felt proud of what I had created. It wasn't about getting even anymore. It was about finding my peace. I didn't need to be tied to my past anymore. Trish and Mark had their lives, and I had mine. I'd learned that no one could take that from me. It wasn't just a fresh start for the shop, it was a fresh start for me, and in the process, I realized I had already won. I wasn't the same person who had been blindsided by betrayal. I had rebuilt myself. I had moved on. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living.